Hello, everybody. It's Mike. So I want to look at the fog surrounding being with a BPD or an NPD. And I know that the clarity to be able to see what is actually happening is extremely difficult to hang on to. If you're able to get any clarity at all, it can be very helpful. So it's like being trapped in a maze. You're trapped inside of a maze with mirrors, and it's foggy in there, and there's false exits, and there's all kinds of, you can't seem to find your way out. And of course, trying to rationally work things out with the borderline or the NPD is impossible. And it's the experience can be very challenging, and it's very easy to be talked back into staying in the middle of it and being told that it's your fault, that you're the one responsible for all of it. I've run into that here, even on this channel, with interactions with, both borderlines and codependents. One of the most recent ones was a comment from a borderline that sounded very reasonable in the beginning, and then it was one of those things when you read it the first time, you felt like somebody was with you and giving you a compliment, but you have that feeling like, why do I just feel like I got beat up? I just ate this huge meal. Why do I feel like I just ate cotton candy? And at the end of it, when I really looked at it, I shared about it online here, was that this person was trying to make the argument that, in a very subtle, roundabout way, that they had BPD because of codependence, because codependents have narcissism, and narcissism is what creates BPD, and therefore I should take a look to see if I'm a narcissist. Do I have a cluster B personality? But just like, until you actually look at it and listen to it, you don't hear that. But codependents are also really good at this too, because bear in mind, nobody gets into this without volunteering. There are no victims. You volunteered for this. Maybe you don't realize it. I know you want to spend all your time talking about all the horrible things that the borderline does, but you chose to do it. And so if you're not able to get honest with yourself, you also can't find the way out. And so I want to share some comments which are sort of like that. I mean, one of them, it's really important. When people comment, whether it's a live comment or whether it's just commenting on the video itself, it's really important that you share your personal connection. Because otherwise, one of the things that both borderlines and codependents do, especially if they're not in any kind of treatment, is they get in the fog of intellectuality, and they, point at things, and they obfuscate, and they create confusion in order to, number one, hide their own personal scenario, their own personal connection, their own personal agendas. But also, you're trying to get me and other people to help you stay there. And I obviously am not going to do that. So I ask specific questions. Tell me what your personal connection is so that I can best help you. I might not be able to help you, but one of the things that we do on this channel, I'm not a therapist. So you're not coming here asking me to therapize you. It's a whole different thing. I am here to reveal what I believe to be the challenges and the difficulties and the confusion, so that people watching can get better. So I will sometimes go after somebody and analyze them and what they're saying, knowing that there's a good chance the person I'm talking to won't get what I'm saying, because they're either in denial or they've decided that they want to get into an argument with me. But other people watching can go, I see, that I can see myself in that. And that's what I'm looking for here. So the best way to interact with me is to ask an honest question. Otherwise, I come after you. That's just the way that I am. So I want to take a look at some comments about this. So this person actually just responded a few minutes ago. I don't know if they might be on the live stream or not. So this person says, what even is BPD? Will we ever know for sure? Now, I can't tell from that question who's talking. All I know is that somebody is lost in their denial, and they're lost in their self-reverie, and it comes across to me as somebody wrapped up in their victim mentality. So I don't respond well to that. I much prefer people being honest and being direct and, revealing who they are and where they are. So that does sound like something a borderline would say. Borderline would say, well, what is borderline personality disorder? Will we ever know for sure? There was somebody that was on this channel for a while who I was having back and forths with, and I felt that was good. This was somebody who was avoiding therapy. This was a borderline who was avoiding therapy, and part of the time would admit to it and share with it, and then the other part would talk about how it doesn't exist and blah blah blah. And then this person finally became abusive, and I blocked them. And that's what I do. If you're abusive, I'll block you. But that is something a borderline would do, is obfuscate it so that they don't have to look at themselves, and they don't have to take a look specifically at the damage of their behavior. They're more than happy to take a look at how damaged they've been and how damaged they feel. But this is also true with codependents, which we're going to see. Codependents do the same thing. And a borderline actually made a very good observation, which is that codependents are very narcissistic. And now, without realizing it, what they were saying is that borderlines and codependents are very closely matched. Whereas the codependent, either in denial or doesn't have the education to understand what codependence is, will put themselves on a spectrum. And this is what you see with the empath, people who are so into being an empath, and people who make the distinction. Oh, I'm not a codependent, I'm an empath, even though it looks exactly the same. And even though I say in order to be a codependent, the first criteria is that you are an empath. And so the empath spectrum, I found out that there's a spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum is the empath, according to them. And on the other end of the spectrum is the psychopath. And so if you say that you're an empath, then of course that puts you on the good spectrum, and the psychopath is the bad spectrum. And of course that is absolutely, completely false. The empath is right there, right standing next to the narcissist, the borderline, right next to each other. Because the narcissism within your codependence is what keeps you there, the fog of your narcissism, your inability to look at your agendas. And there's nothing wrong with having an agenda, by the way. There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody has one. If you go to the store and you want to buy a pair of shoes, your agenda is to buy comfortable shoes that fit your feet and do the function you want them to do. When you want to marry somebody, you have an agenda to have them love you and to love them. And if you want kids, they're going to be, you have agendas. Everybody does. There's nothing wrong with them. And one of the most dangerous person is the person who denies that they have an agenda. That's either a con man or somebody who's deluded, and it's usually both. Somebody who is deluded and is a con man. So I much prefer people being able to say what their agenda is. So anyway, this person says, what is BPD? We'll never know for sure. Will we ever know for sure? And I ask, are you a borderline? Because I was sure that they were. And the person says, no, not a borderline. Again, you're not sharing anything. You're coming on here because I've stimulated you to feel something. I've talked about recovery and you want that. So how is anybody going to help you if you don't reveal who you are, what's going on? Just throwing this out does nothing. If I just walked away from that, it's just some big giant turd. What is BPD? We'll never know. I mean, I know that wasn't your motivation, but it comes across that way. That's the narcissism of being a codependent. It's just right there, and it's very passive aggressive. It's actually kind of abusive. because it brings all the attention to you and creates a fog, and you're not asking an honest question. If you ask me an honest question like, what is BPD? I can tell you, but I already know that you know that just by asking that question. You don't want to know. Here's what you don't realize. You don't want to know the truth. Because if you know the truth, then you have to let go of your fantasies. I believe this is somebody who's holding on to their fantasies and doesn't want to let go of it. So I asked, please share your personal connection. Are you a partner of a borderline, ex-partner? And then this person doesn't answer the question. Oh, do they? Yes, they do. Sorry, I'm mixing it up with somebody else. This person does answer the question. Says, I'm a codependent. I've had a traumatic experience with a borderline 3 years ago. That's important. I keep telling you guys that being in a relationship with a borderline is like getting bit by a zombie. Just because you haven't seen the zombie in 3 years doesn't mean that you don't have the zombie virus infected inside of you. That infection is not going to go away on its own. So this is 3 years ago. My real question was a rhetorical because I feel we'll never really get to the bottom. So why are you including me in that? I believe I've gotten to the bottom of it. You're wanting to impose upon me your inability and or unwillingness to take a look at the facts because 3 years later you're still attached. The only way you can still be attached is if you still have an agenda, you still have a fantasy. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to get honest. Blanketing everything, externalizing everything is a way of avoiding. So by saying, I feel we'll never really get to the bottom of what BPD is, I feel quite comfortable that I have, and so does medical science, psychiatric science. They're pretty clear on it as well. You're the one that's not clear. So you're much better off getting honest about where you're at. Instead of, this is a way of avoiding. It's also a way of controlling. You're controlling us by making the statement for yourself for everybody because you don't really want to be challenged on it. I feel we'll never really get to the bottom of what BPD actually is, and it's sad for you. That would make me sad also. I've tried my hardest to figure it out during my time recovering and realized that it's better time spent in healing, figuring yourself, than to endlessly try to chase conclusions about someone else, especially if they hurt you. And then they go on to say they found my video very informative. I appreciate that. I don't agree with what you're saying here. I agree with you need to be healing yourself, but you aren't doing that because you are filled with rumination. I kind of make fun of that word rumination because it's a way of intellectualizing and minimizing the trauma of obsession. And what this is all about, this is the core of codependence. The denial within codependence is the denial to accept that borderline personality disorder is a mental illness. That there is very likely a genetic factor along with it, that there's been abuse, sexual abuse, but even if it's just been abandonment, it is horrific abuse that has done damage, perhaps to the nervous system, to the brain. It's a mental illness. We wouldn't be sitting around here wondering what is going on with someone who has schizophrenia. We go, no, there's something wrong upstairs. There's all kinds of wires aren't crossing, and we accept that. They come over and they walk up to you and they say something that makes absolutely no sense, and somebody says, no, he's schizophrenic. You go, well, and then you understand. So this lack of understanding isn't coming from the objective facts in front of you. The lack of understanding is coming from your inability and or unwillingness to let go of the hope that someday the borderline will see the damage they've caused, will have a rational response, and turn around and love you. What you're really saying is, I don't understand why they don't love me. That's it. You have an emotional attachment, an emotional agenda, an emotional need. We all have them. And until you get honest with your need that is driving you to be with them, you're going to stay in this fog. What you describe as stop trying to figure them out and spend time healing on yourself sounds really good, and it might be good, but it's also a recipe for avoiding your own attachments, avoiding your own agendas. This is why I tell people the 3 things that you have to do in order to heal. And I have no empathy, I have no sympathy, I have empathy. I have no sympathy for people who won't take the free tools that are available. Why don't people do that? Because they want to stay right where this person is. Now, I'm not trying to beat this person up. I understand it's very challenging to stay there, but there's a way out. There's a way out of this maze, but you have to be willing to do the work. So the first step is get therapy. All right, now a lot of you, now let me just talk about that for a second. I hear this excuse. I don't have the money. I understand that. There aren't any therapists around me. I understand that. There isn't any therapy in this country. I understand that. Except we have this thing called the internet. And there's absolutely zero doubt in my mind that if you went online looking for free online therapy, you would find it. So if you're not finding it, it means that you're not committed to finding it. You want to find excuses to avoid it. Second thing, coda.org. This is 100% free. You can go to a Zoom meeting no matter where you live in the world, and you can get free help. Work those 12 steps. You can go online today, get to a meeting and say, hi, I'm brand new. I need a sponsor to help me walk through the 12 steps. You can do that right now. Nothing is stopping you. And the third one is daily meditation, so that you can stay, when you get some awareness, you can stay in an objective state of mind and continue to work on it. You have to treat your pain as a disease. You have to treat the pain that you're experiencing in the fog of being unable to understand what borderline personality disorder is, why it was so painful to you, why you got involved with, you have to understand all that, and that's not going to happen if you don't do the work. Sitting around trying to figure them out, I know what that's like. I tried to do that also. That's what this channel is about. In the very beginning, the first videos is me doing exactly that. And I came to the conclusion, without really understanding what it meant, I came to the conclusion that this was somebody who was, for all intents and purposes, I have to treat them like they're insane. You can't expect sane people to do anything rational. Insane people to do anything rational. I had to come to that conclusion so that I could separate and heal, because otherwise you get stuck in the rumination of, people still, they get upset because they won't co-sign their narrative. Well, if they are trying to find love, and if they were abused and I'm loving them, why won't they love me back? One recent one was, why is my borderline going back to their abusive parents? That's not an honest question. That question is, why is that person leaving me? I'm not abusing them. Why won't they stay with me? And that's what you need to look at. Why do you want to be with somebody who's doing that? They objectively are. The answer to that question is, well, let's take a look at it. They are leaving you to go be with the people that abused them and caused their problems to begin with. That they complain about how much they hate their parents and blah, 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 but they're going back to them. What does that objective information tell you? Without you getting involved in, I have to fix them, I have to heal them, they have to love me, when you take all of that out of it, the only conclusion is there must be something wrong upstairs. They're obviously not rational. So why are you demanding that they be rational toward you when it comes to you loving them? Something upstairs wrong with you. You're lost in the fog, the confusion of your desire. Now, the short answer to that question is that the reason why you're chasing after them is because they remind you of somebody in your family of origin, your mother, your father, somebody, and they didn't give you the love and the nurturing that you wanted, and you're wanting to replay that abuse, whether it's neglect or outright abuse, so that you can fix it. Because what you want is you want mommy and daddy to love you. This is what therapy is all about. You go to therapy to come to understand this. And then when you can stop focusing on why is the borderline doing this? Why are they doing that? And you focus on why, did my mom and dad do that? And how did it affect me? And I'm never going to get mom and dad's love. It's never going to happen. Mom was sick. Mom was whatever. Then you go, oh, and I picked mom again. Oh, that's why the borderline's like that. The answer, this person is right. The answer is looking at themselves. But that question, let me ask that question. Let me just respond again to that question. How does that help anybody? What is BPD anyway? How are we ever going to know? How does that question contribute to the rest of us on this channel from learning anything? It's not. It comes across to me as very, you're whining and complaining. You're wrapped up in your victim mentality. So that's why I respond. I don't like that in myself. I don't like victim mentality in myself, so I come at it pretty hard. So you guys are going to have to forgive me for that. All right, so let's see. There's another question that I wanted to, there's a couple more. Here's one. Somebody says, what does it mean when a codependent says, I love you? First off, I don't know who this person is. Are they a borderline or are they a codependent? Why are you asking this question? Please reveal who you are. That way I can help you. But, what does it, because I need to know what your agenda is. To ask that question, you have an agenda. Are you trying to figure yourself out? Or are you a borderline trying to figure out how codependents think? It sounds like a borderline fishing, to me anyway, it sounds like a borderline fishing for evidence to prove why codependents are abusive. I'd be able to, I'd be happy to take that trip with you because codependents do need to see their abuse. And by the way, it is abusive. Staying with a borderline after they have split on you once is abusive. Continuing to expect a borderline to love you after they've shown you that they're unwilling and or incapable is abusive. I know you don't want to hear that, but it is. It doesn't help them. It keeps them, it's giving drugs to a drug addict. That's abuse. So I would love to answer that question, but first I need to know what the connection that person is. All right, here's a really interesting one. And again, it tells me everything about you. Everything is projection. This person says, Mike, do you think it might be harder being in a relationship with someone who has strong BPD traits, but not the full-blown disorder? Someone who is actually capable of love, but still has the emotional volatility. So, of course, I'm going to respond with, where the hell is this coming from? Who are you in this? What is your, right? But I'm definitely being set up. This person is clearly setting me up. He even says so. It's not an honest question. It says, do you think it might be harder to be in this, so this person is wanting me to say, yes, you're absolutely right. So I don't like that either. I don't like people shoving assumptions down my throat and then trying to get me to bite on their hook to justify their position. That's why I say the best way to work with me is to have an honest question. It helps to say, this person goes on to say, so I ask basically, where's the question coming from? Who are you, et cetera, et cetera. I do say that there's a difference between, somebody who has full-blown BPD, they split. They go from loving you to hating you. So somebody who has borderline traits, in my opinion, and this is difficult because BPD is a spectrum, so you can't nail them down. Now, I was lucky. I was with somebody who had hardcore, serious, full-blown borderline personality disorder with all kinds of other comorbid things. So she was a real handful. So he's right about that. It became easy for me to leave because it was intolerable to stay. And she made it intolerable, obviously. But I was married to somebody whom I would characterize as having borderline traits, but she wasn't a borderline. She didn't split on me. We had been together for 10 years, and after 10 years, she finally made it so impossible that I had no choice but to leave. And it certainly has the flavor of a borderline, but it doesn't have the confusion. The pain was there. There was, we could talk about abuse, but there were some good times. There were parts of time when she was in therapy and she was working, a codependent 12-step program. And so there were times when we got along pretty well for years. And she didn't idealize or any of that other stuff. So I wouldn't have said she was a borderline. Was it a painful relationship? Yeah, the way it ended was extremely painful and I was in a lot of pain, but I wasn't in that fog that the previous person said, what is BPD? How will we ever know? I wasn't in that kind of a fog. It was clear. It made sense. It was painful. She had problems. I could go on and on about how she did this and she did that and she was narcissistic in this way and damaging in that way and confusing in this way, and she lied and manipulated, but it was all within the realm of human understandability. We could say she has emotional issues, but it made sense. Borderlines don't make any sense. So what I hear in this is that if you're on this, I wouldn't, and if I were to come onto this channel back then, I wouldn't have related. There wouldn't have been a hook for me to stay in and listen because I was in somebody who just had traits. There is a big difference. By the way, anybody who is a codependent already has borderline traits. You already are. And you gain more borderline traits the longer you stay with a borderline. It becomes infectious. It's contagious. So I said something to the effect of, so it sounds like you're asking me to co-sign the idea that your situation is worse than others because, those who are with a full-blown borderline, it's easier for them to leave. And that is not true. There are people who have been with borderlines for 10, 20, 30 years. And, full-blown borderline. So if it was easy, they would have all have left. One of the reasons that I was able to help facilitate a scenario where I left was because I've been in therapy most of my adult life. I've been in 12 steps. So I had barely enough wherewithal to give her a boundary, which said, I can't be in your life unless you go to therapy for borderline personality disorder, which she originally agreed to, and thank God she didn't for me, because had she agreed to it, I might still be there. Because what I didn't realize at the time is that borderlines, especially ones that are, quote, full-blown, just because they're in therapy, that doesn't automatically fix them. It takes at least 10 years of them being single and alone and working very hard to get better before they have any ability to manage their symptoms. Their BPD never goes away. Had I been stuck in it, it would have just been worse because there would have been this false hope that she's going to get better. I probably would have ended up leaving at that point, at some point anyway, but that's what gave me the ability to leave. Even though she did the final discard, it was the boundary that I put down that actually caused her to split. So this scenario isn't true. That, as somebody who has full blown, it's easier for them to leave. This is telling me that you're wrapped up in your denial. You're wrapped up in your hope, your inability to see the truth. So, you're looking for an excuse to stay. And again, just because you're out of the relationship, whoever you are, not just this person, just because you're out of the relationship doesn't mean you're not still attached. The idea is to detach. You won't be able to detach until you are able to see your hope, your delusions, and your wanting them to love you. Your insistence that somebody who has shown they don't have the ability, you insist that they love you. You keep insisting and projecting rationality onto them. That's why it feels so crazy to you. I get it. because they come across, when they're not splitting, they come across very, a lot of times anyway, very intelligent, very rational, and very loving. And the hard part is the promises. The promise of the connection, the promise of the love that's about to come. It's right in front of you. You can almost taste it. It's just right out of your reach. But if you just wait long enough, you'll be able to grab onto the end of that rope and it'll save you. And that rope always gets pulled away, always, just in time. That's the insanity of it. The really hard that they do seem very rationally to let you think that they're gonna let you love them, that they're gonna love you back, and they mean it. It's really hard, but it still means you're in denial. The only thing that keeps you there is your desire for your needs to get met. When you can accept that'll never happen, this is part of the delusion. This is part of the disorder. That, this is part of, this will never happen. If you can get rid of the hope, then you can escape. So I go on to say, you didn't answer the question. Please tell me, what is your connection here? And then I ask a question. I say, if they're truly capable of giving and receiving love, as you say, then why are we even talking about leaving? Something's missing here. So please answer the question so I can best help you. This person says, yes, I am in a relationship with a woman who has either strong BPD traits or is on the lesser affected spectrum of full-blown BPD. I don't know if you're qualified to make that distinction. I don't think that you're qualified because you're wrapped up in it. You're obviously talking about leaving, so it's obviously toxic to you. You're obviously attached in an unhealthy way because you're not able to determine what the hell's really going on. And this is the fog of BPD. The whole fog of it, like I just said, is they're very, they believe it too. But the disorder is really good at pretending to be rational. And that's the thing, that there's always this, it'll just work if I can just explain it to them. And then when they hoover you back, they make you believe that they understand. Maybe they are convinced that they understand. But understanding doesn't follow through with action because then they split again harder the next time. So I'm not convinced that you know or are capable of making this conclusion that this person only has traits because you're still addicted to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We usually have a mutually loving relationship. At least once or twice per week, she'll suddenly shift her mood or go off. That's borderline. Where did you get the conclusion that, that the time frame means something? It could be a month. It could be 2 months. It could be every day. So this is like talking to an alcoholic who says, I'm not a full-blown alcoholic because I don't drink every day. But they drink themselves into a stupor, or there's alcoholism that is periodic. Well, they'll go months and then they'll go on a bender. So, my friend, you are in denial. What you just described is typical. Borderline personality disorder is they idealize you. So what you say as mutually loving relationship, if she suddenly splits on you, that's when she's idealizing you. Idealization means that the thing about a borderline is that they can't see you. They project onto you and or transfer their feelings that they had for their parents. Everybody is a parent. And so when they love you wonderfully and beautifully, and it's the most amazing love you've ever had. They also have facades. So they can put on a facade that allows them to interact with people, and one of the facades can be a really loving person, a really rational person, a really helpful person, but it's just a facade because that facade never lasts. And like you said, once or twice per week, that's full-blown BPD, full-blown. So I don't know where you're getting this idea. I think maybe your denial is trying to minimize it so you can stay in it. And any perceived hint that I'm not fully invested in the relationship, her mood will suddenly go off. She's extremely jealous of my female co-workers and friends and even complains about me spending time with my family members, saying I'm putting her last in my priorities, which is far from the truth. I love her dearly, especially when she's behaving rationally. I mean, you love her when she's idealizing you. But I hate walking on eggshells around her. I feel like I get enough good out of the relationship to stay in it, but it shouldn't be this hard. My friend, you are deeply in denial. You are talking about a full-blown borderline personality disorder relationship. I don't know how long you've been with this person. I'm assuming you haven't been with her that long. But what I can guarantee you is that the longer you stay, the shorter the rational, as you call it, times with her are going to get shorter and shorter. The times that she, as you say, suddenly shifts her mood or goes off at any perceived hint that I'm not fully invested in the relationship, those moments will get worse and worse until eventually, see, you're projecting onto the rest of us that it gets so bad that we have this conscious ability to go, whoa, this is bad, I'm out of here. And that's not how it works. We get strung along, we can't leave, and they usually will do something that is so horrendous that you have to leave. So you are in a full-on borderline relationship. What you don't realize is that you are a codependent. And as a codependent, you have a fantasy that you keep holding on to, and you explain it perfectly. I love her dearly, especially when she's behaving rationally, which means the way you want. But I hate walking on eggshells around her. I feel like I get enough good out of the relationship to stay in it, but it shouldn't be this hard. So which one is it? Is it that you're getting enough good to stay? Then that's not very hard. It shouldn't be this hard. No, it's abusive. Twice a week, according to you, twice a week, she gets jealous of your female coworkers or friends, complains about you spending time with your family, saying that you're putting her last in your priorities. That's abusive. She doesn't trust you. She doesn't love you. She doesn't see you. Why do you want to be with somebody who refuses to see you? What's going to happen is that she's going to demand more and more of your love, which you're going to keep giving to her in the hopes that she'll stay rational, because you don't understand what borderline personality disorder is. You don't understand it's a mental illness. You just think she's irrational and insecure. And if you can just give her enough security, then eventually she'll become rational. That is understandable because that's what the disorder does. It's really good at getting you to stay there. And that feeling of walking on eggshells around her means that you never feel safe. You never feel loved. You never feel accepted. Somebody who loves you wants to go, wow, tell me about your family. Wow, that's so great. Do you spend time with your mom? I love that. I love that you love your mom. That tells me that you can love me. That's what a rational, loving person does. Really, it's so great that you have friends at work. There's nothing worse than being at work and have people that you can't be friends with. No, that's great. That's awesome. I love that. I love that you are able to have friendships with women and you still come home to me. You love me more than them. That's a loving partner. There's nothing here that you've described that is loving in any way. Because if somebody can, on the one moment, love you and think you're wonderful, and the next moment tell you you're the worst person for whatever the reason is, they don't love you. It's all fantasy. It's all cotton candy. There's nothing of substance there. So, bottom line is, my friend, you tried to manipulate me. If I had just listened to your question the way you wanted me to hear it, you were trying to manipulate me into co-signing your dysfunctional relationship. I know you don't realize that, but that's what you were doing. Because you loaded the question. Do you think it might be harder being in a relationship with somebody who has strong BPD traits but not the full-blown disorder? because that's mine. She's not full blown. She just splits on me twice a week and won't let me hang out with my family and constantly thinks that I'm not giving to the relationship, and I have to walk on eggshells around her all the time. And I really love it when she likes me, but I really never feel loved and safe. That's called full-blown codependence. You are a full-blown codependent because you're not seeing reality. You've been bitten. You've got the borderline virus in you, and it doesn't matter how much Regeneron you take. It's not going to go away unless so you need help, Gary. I recommend getting out. You have my permission. I give you complete permission to tell your partner, listen, this is really painful for me, and I, for my own health, have to leave. I would recommend you look into getting help. I think you might have borderline personality disorder. She's not going to like hearing that, but you might be the one person who tells her the truth that eventually she'll go and get help. Because after you, if you haven't been with her long enough, what's going to happen is she's going to drop you, and or she's going to cheat on you while she's with you. And then, if you are the one that reflects back, I'm leaving because of your behavior, it's hurtful to me, I love you, but I can't stand the pain, and I think you need help. You might be the one 3 or 4 relationships down the road when she keeps doing this that she might, maybe I should get some help. But if you really love her, that's what you're going to do. But I challenge you to prove me wrong. I don't think that you truly love her. Why do I say that? Because I don't think you'll have the guts to tell her that. I think you're going to try and make it work until it becomes so bad and you've been so emotionally destroyed that, as you say, you have no choice but to leave. So that's my prediction. I'm totally happy to be wrong about that. You might go to her and say, this is really painful, I want to leave, and I think you need to go into therapy. And she'll say, no, you're right. And she might go to therapy, and you'll find out that something else is wrong. Anything can happen. I seriously doubt it, though. Because people don't end up on this channel unless there's something going on. So those are some of the things. I could keep going, but we'll stop there. If you have questions, I'm happy to take your questions. Again, I prefer honest questions. Otherwise, I do what I just did. Because I can smell when somebody is in codependent denial. I can smell it. I go after it like a shark. And I do it to help everybody watching and listening to learn and grow, even if I'm not able to help the person in question. And if you leave a comment, the whole world can see it anyway, so if you don't want me to examine you, don't leave a comment. Let's see. No questions here. Why not tell all of us why you've been in therapy for 20 years? Benny, what does that have to do with anything? Why are you trying to get rid of that? How is that any of your business? And how is that helpful? I can tell you that I've been in therapy for having been in a borderline relationship. The rest of it's none of your business. Why do you feel you need to know that? How does that help you? I'm here to talk about recovery from codependence in a borderline relationship. See what else? Astro Whale. We need to define what codependence is. Are you talking about yourself here? Are you trying to say you're not a codependent? Which is, by the way, one of the signs of a codependent is they deny it. You say love bombing doesn't just work on codependence, it also works on people with low self-esteem. So the requirement for being a codependent, number 1, is being an empath. Number 2 is low self-esteem, insecurity. Are you talking about yourself? Benny, now you're getting, all right, so Benny, I'm going to block you. Now you're just getting abusive. Benny, you have my permission to go somewhere else. You don't like my channel? There's plenty to watch. You don't think I'm qualified? Stop wasting your time. Go somewhere else. So what I do is when people are abusive, I block them. So I'm going to block you. You can watch the channel, but you will not get to abuse me anymore. So let's all say goodbye to Benny because he's going. Let's see what else. I'm willing to bet Benny's a borderline. Astro Whale, again, ask a question, I can answer it. Drop a statement, you're setting yourself up for me to examine you. Put you on the examination table, carve you open. Who wants that? I reckon if anyone ended up here on this channel, we're kind of fucked up in some way. I agree. Great channel. You help a lot of people. Thanks. Okay. Thank you, Charlie. All right. So that's it. No more questions. No more abuse. So, if you are somebody that's been in a romantic relationship with a borderline, or you're currently in one, if years later, like people say, years later, they're still in pain, they still don't understand, they're still trying to figure it out. I know what it felt like. When I got out of that relationship, I had never felt anything to that degree. I had never felt such pain. I had never felt so insane. I had never felt so devalued in my entire life. I didn't think I was going to survive. And I have. I am completely healed from that relationship. I don't spend any time thinking about her, worrying about her, ruminating about her. I'm not angry with her. I don't have any resentment. I completely see that I was coming from my own unresolved childhood codependent issues, and I was trying to resolve it with the most qualified candidate, which means that, you know, my childhood stuff was pretty fucked up and has nothing to do with her. If I had been sane, the moment that she, even the first communication, I would have gone, that doesn't sound very healthy. So if you want that, I tell you exactly how I do it. Click the join button, which is right next to the subscribe button. I tell you how to flip your thinking, because your thinking has been flipped. Like a canoe. When a canoe gets flipped over, it doesn't magically flip itself back. You're thinking, once you've been trained by a borderline, once they have uncovered the codependence within you, and they've awoken it, your thinking gets flipped over and it never goes back to normal by itself. So you need somebody to help you. You know, try and lift a big canoe on your own. You can't do it. You need somebody to help you. So flip your canoe back right so you can navigate the waters of your emotions. Click the join button. I teach you how to do that. And I also give you 2 breath meditations that help you to reset your brain chemistry so that you can see things objectively, so you're not wrapped up in the confusion of your agendas, along with the other things that I've mentioned. So click the join button at the super empath level and you'll have access to those members only videos. All right, that's it. No more questions, no more business to be done. Thanks for coming on, and even thank you to the abusive borderline who decided to try and crash our party. And that's it. Talk to you guys later. Let me look for my end screen, which is right there.